and welcome back to another video. Today I thought it might be useful for me to run through my favourite supplies for lino printing on fabric. I absolutely love printing on fabric and it's taken so much trial and error to find out which supplies are my favourite. I've tried so many different inks and so many different rollers and things like that, and I think I found finally what works really well for me, so I really wanted to share it with you guys because I feel like there's not too much information out there on lino printing on fabric or block printing on fabric. I might be completely wrong on that, so please let me know. I just thought it would be really useful to share everything that I have found out and the supplies that I use. I'm completely self-taught when it comes to fabric printing and lino printing, so these are just things that have worked for me. Please let me know what's worked for you in the comments. I would love to know. I love trying out new supplies and things, but let's just get straight into my favourite supplies. So my favourite surface that I use for printing on fabric is the Speedable Speedy Carve. I absolutely love this stamp rubber. It's so easy to carve and it's really deep as well, so you can get a nice deep cut when you carve it with your lino tools, and this is really good for fabric printing as well. It's super squishy, so it can be squished really nicely into like the weave of the fabric. It's also really flexible, so when you're peeling the print off the fabric you can peel it off really slowly and really like flexibly. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but it just works really well for fabric printing. There is also Speedable Easy Carve, which is the blue stamp rubber, and Speedable Speedy Carve is the pink stamp rubber. I massively prefer Speedable Speedy Carve, so the pink stamp rubber. I find that the blue stamp rubber is very grainy and it's a little bit more difficult to carve. You can't get as clean lines. I haven't used it very much, so I don't have a lot of experience with it, but when I did use it I didn't like it and I didn't find that it gave a very clean print, especially for fabric printing. So I would opt for the Speedable Speedy Carve, which is the pink stamp rubber. You can get super clean lines. Again, it's very deep, so you can get a nice clean carve and carve away all of the background so there's no noise with your print, and it does work really well for fabric printing because of the flexibility. So definitely one of my tips is to do small stamps when you are printing on fabric. I've just found that that's really easy, like repeat patterns, things like that, or like a little kind of motif in the middle of a t-shirt or on a tote bag. That works really well. I'm definitely a massive fan of like the repeat pattern and like little stamps. Recently I've done some like strawberry stamps. I printed some burnt cloths for my daughter and I think that they looked really cute with the repeat pattern, and they were like the tiniest little stamp. So in terms of inks for fabric printing, I have quite a few actually which are in my favourites. So the first one is the Speedable Block Printing Fabric Ink. This is really good because it is so thick and it gives a really nice crisp print. It's also good if you're using this on a thicker, more textured fabric. It creates like a really thick layer of ink onto the fabric, so you get a nice even print. When you're using this ink, you really want to make sure that it's really tacky when you roll it out and you get a really nice thick layer onto the stamp rubber or the lino. It definitely works best if you test print it a couple of times so that the ink can build up on the stamp rubber and then start printing onto your desired fabric or t-shirt or whatever. Definitely test print it a few times. You're going to get a much thicker layer of ink and it's going to create a much better print overall. These inks are super pigmented as well and they're really easy to mix, so if you want to mix a couple of colours together, it does mix really well. It perhaps doesn't mix as well as some other inks, but it does still mix really well and you can get a really nice print with it. Because the ink is so thick, sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to mix, and I found that some of the colours don't mix too well together. So for example, if you're mixing a blue and a red, sometimes the purple can be quite dull and perhaps not as bright as you would want, but if that's what you're going for then that's absolutely fine. So the second ink that I absolutely love for fabric printing, and I discovered this one a little bit more recently, is the Versacraft ink pad stamp things. I don't know exactly what they're called, I can't remember off the top of my head, but these are really good. It's just a little ink pad that you stamp onto the stamp rubber and then you place that onto the fabric. Again, they're really pigmented, they're so easy and simple to use. You don't need to roll out any ink, you don't need a roller or a palette or anything like that, so they're definitely a really easy option. They're also very affordable. I think one stamp is around about £4, so they are much cheaper than the Speedable inks, which I think are around about £12 for a tube. Again, I buy these from Handprinted UK. They've got such an amazing range of colours and they are just amazing. I really like them. I think that they're really good. They do need to be heat set after you have printed them, but they're really good. The only downside is you can't mix the colours together, so if you're wanting to do like a multi-coloured print or you want loads of different colours, you are going to have to buy the individual ink pads, which is a little bit of a shame, but I think that's worth it because they work really well. Again, you can just stamp the ink pad onto the stamp rubber or the lino. It gives a really thick coat, which is good. Definitely works better on a thinner fabric, so not as textured, and it doesn't work very well on something like a brushed cotton. It works better on a normal cotton. These are really good for t-shirts and little stamps as well. If you're printing something bigger, these ones wouldn't work as well, just because it would take you such a long time to stamp the entire area of your block. So another ink that I love for fabric printing is the SD block printing fabric inks, I think they're called. So these come in a pack of 5, so they come with the primary colours and black and white. I think they're around about £24, or they were when I bought them. I got mine from Cass Art, and I think that's quite good value for money because you're getting the whole set of the primary colours, and these ones are amazing to mix. They're a little bit thinner than the Speedball inks, and you can mix them together really well. The colours mix so beautifully. You can create really, really bright, vibrant colours, or you can create more subtle tones, and it's really useful to have the primary colours black and white, because then you can just mix whatever colour you want, and you only need those 5 inks, and you can just mix to get your desired colour. I think these are really, really good. They are a little bit thinner, so they can be slightly difficult to roll out. I found sometimes they can be a little bit slippery, but once you've rolled them out until they're a tacky consistency, they do print really, really well. Again, with these, you want to make sure that you're test printing them so that the ink can build up on the block a little bit. This just helps with getting, again, a more even print, but these inks are slightly better for a thinner fabric, but they do work well on a slightly textured, thicker fabric, just not something that's really textured. These also give a little bit more of a subtle print, and the ink tends to sink down into like the weave of the fabric, whereas the Speedball inks I've personally found tend to sit on top of the fabric a little bit more. I hope that makes sense. I feel like that makes absolutely no sense, but that's the only way that I can explain it. But I do really like these inks. If you don't heat set them, however, they will completely wash out of the fabric. The VersaCraft ink pads will wash out a little bit, but they'll leave like a little bit of residue behind, whereas these will completely wash out, I've found. So if you do print something and you are unhappy with it, there is the option to wash it and they will be removed completely. This might not happen with different colours, but I've tried it with pink and it completely washed out. So that's quite good. It's a little bit of peace of mind if you are worried about making a mistake, that it wouldn't be like the final print, and you can wash it out. There are like definitely pros and cons to that, but these do need heat setting, so if you're using them, remember to heat set them before you wash them. So the next thing is a Baron. I honestly go on about this Baron all the time. I feel like I've spoken about it in so many videos, but I find it's really, really useful. My dad made this one for me, but you can buy them hand printed, have a couple on their website. So I like a Baron when I'm fabric printing because it allows me to use my body weight to apply pressure to the stamp. And it just works really well because you need a lot of pressure, I found, for fabric printing. You really need to push the stamp rubber into the fabric to push the ink right down into the fabric, and a Baron works perfectly for that. I like to first off apply pressure using my hands and my fingers just to go over the block, just to push it in to the fabric initially, and then I apply more all over pressure to the block using a Baron. I find that this works best, and it can be a little bit tiring on your wrists, so you definitely don't want to be doing it like long term for like days on end, but a little bit at a time is absolutely fine. A Baron in general is really useful for printmaking. It is sort of an alternative to a printing press or a roller. It's just an alternative way to apply pressure to a block, and I really like a Baron. I find they're really portable. You don't need loads of space to set up when you're printing using a Baron, because they're really, really tiny. They work really well, especially for fabric printing and using it with the Speedball stamp rubber. I find that's the best way to apply pressure to that. I also like to apply pressure to the centre of the design using my hands after I've used the Baron, just to make sure that the block is going to print evenly onto the fabric and that the pressure has been applied evenly all over. Alternatively, you don't even need a Baron, you can just use your hands to print the stamp rubber onto fabric. That works equally as well, but if you are looking for a tool, then a Baron is a good thing to get. So then the last thing isn't really one of my favourites, but I wanted to include it because it's an essential for fabric printing, I feel, and that is an iron. So that is so that you can iron the fabric before you print on it, because it's really important to start with fabric that isn't creased and fabric that is just nice and flat, so that you can get really even prints and your prints are not being disrupted by creases in the fabric. Also, you will need an iron to heat set some of the inks that I have spoken about. Even the speedball ink, which doesn't need heat setting, I like to just run the iron over it on a lower temperature after I've printed, just to make sure that the fabric is nice and flat, especially if I'm going to be selling whatever I've printed. So I do some art markets and things where I sell some of the things I've printed, so I just like to iron all of them, but also just to make sure that the fabric looks nice after I finish printing as well. So an iron is definitely an essential for fabric printing, especially if you're using an ink that needs to be heat set, but I would say in general, just so you can get. So those are all of my favourite supplies for fabric printing. Please let me know if you think I've forgotten anything. I feel like I may be forgetting something, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But I really hope that you found this video helpful, and I really appreciate you watching.